You are stumbling through the dense, suffocating canopy of the Pacific Northwest timberland. It's December 1985. The air is biting, thick with the scent of damp pine and rotting autumn leaves. You think you're alone out here, but the silence feels deliberate. Ahead of you, a red 1982 Plymouth pickup truck sits idling on an abandoned logging road just off Washington State Route 7. The driver's side door is unlocked. Inside, a haunting message is scrawled across a manila envelope resting on the dashboard. "I love you, Diana." There are fresh bloodstains on the seat, sticky and dark. You back away, your eyes scanning the tree line, and that's when you see it. Half buried in the fresh December snow is the body of 20-year-old Diana Robertson. She has been stabbed 17 times. But it is the detail around her throat that makes your blood run colder than the winter air. A standard, striped tube sock is tied tightly around her neck in a brutal, ritualistic knot. 30 miles north, under the buzzing fluorescent lights of a Spanaway Kmart, a 2-year-old girl named Crystal stands shivering outside the entrance. She is dazed, utterly alone, and entirely too young to explain how she got there. When her grandmother finally spots her picture on the local news days later and asks where her mother is, the toddler can only offer a chilling, 5-word response. "Mommy was in the trees." To understand the nightmare in the woods of Lewis and Pierce counties, we have to look back 4 months prior to that grim December discovery. The Mineral, Washington murders, dubbed by a terrified public as the Tube Sock Killings, actually began in August 1985. Stephen Harkins, 27, and his girlfriend, Ruth Cooper, 42, packed up their Tacoma home for what was supposed to be a peaceful weekend camping trip at Tule Lake. They never returned to their jobs on Monday. 4 days into the search, hikers made a gruesome discovery at a remote campsite. Harkins was still in his sleeping bag, shot execution-style through the head. Nearby, the couple's pet dog lay dead, also executed. But Ruth Cooper was nowhere to be found. For over 2 months, the woods kept her secret. It wasn't until late October that a searcher found a human skull near Hart's Lake, roughly 1.5 miles from the original campsite. It belonged to Ruth. When investigators recovered the rest of her remains 50 feet away, they found the killer's calling card. A tube sock wrapped tightly around her neck. When Diana Robertson was found in February 1986 with the exact same signature, law enforcement knew they were dealing with a calculated serial offender. But the Robertson case came with a confounding twist. Diana's boyfriend, 36-year-old animal trapper Mike Reamer, was completely missing. Because Reamer had a history of a domestic assault charge against Diana from just 2 months prior, police naturally looked at him as their prime suspect. The prevailing theory was dark. Reamer had killed his girlfriend, abandoned his toddler at the Kmart, and vanished into the wilderness to escape justice. He was branded a fugitive, a monster hiding in plain sight. The mystery froze over for decades. Then, in 2009, the wilderness spoke again. Hikers walking through a 1-mile radius of Diana's 1986 recovery site stumbled upon a partial human skull. Forensics confirmed the truth. It belonged to Mike Reamer. He hadn't run away. He had been out there in the dirt the entire time. While his exact cause of death couldn't be determined, a gunshot wound to the head was ruled out, and investigators finally shifted their perspective. Reamer wasn't the killer. He was the monster's final victim. For a true crime audience, the Tube Sock Killings present a fascinating, deeply unsettling case study in criminal profiling. Here is a psychological breakdown of the unknown perpetrator. One of the most unusual aspects of this case is the divergence in the method of killing. Stephen Harkins was shot while asleep, a low-risk, detached method. Diana Robertson, however, was stabbed 17 times. In behavioral analysis, 17 stab wounds represent overkill, which strongly suggests a high level of emotional frenzy, anger, or personal grievance. Typically, serial killers don't switch methods so drastically unless dictated by situational logistics. It is highly probable that the killer used a firearm to quickly neutralize the male victims, Harkins and presumably Reamer, because they posed a physical threat, while saving the prolonged, sadistic violence, stabbing and strangulation, for the female victims. In profiling, a signature is an unnecessary act performed by the killer to satisfy a psychological need, whereas staging is altering a crime scene to redirect police suspicion. The tube socks tied around the necks of Ruth Cooper and Diana Robertson serve as a definitive psychological signature. Asterisk peak of control. The sock wasn't just a weapon, it was a trophy left behind. Wrapping it tightly around the necks of dead or dying victims points to a killer obsessed with complete domination and degradation. The domestic, commonplace object. The choice of a mundane, household item like a tube sock implies a killer of opportunity. They likely carried these items with them or utilized what was readily available in their own vehicle, suggesting an organized offender who brought a kill kit into the woods. The killer operated with absolute comfort in the deep, treacherous terrain of Pierce and Lewis counties. This speaks to a geographic stable offender. This individual likely lived or worked in the immediate logging communities. They knew which backroads were unpatrolled, how long a body could lie undisturbed in the snow, and where hikers were unlikely to venture. The woods weren't a hiding place, they were the killer's home turf. Perhaps the most psychologically baffling element is the survival of 2-year-old Crystal. The killer brutally slaughtered her mother and father, yet drove 30 miles to a Spanaway Kmart to leave the toddler safely in a public space. Why? The killer's boundaries. Some serial offenders operate under a strict, compartmentalized moral code. In their mind, adults are fair game, but children are off limits. Asterisk a local connection. Alternatively, the killer may have feared that a crying baby left in the truck or the woods would draw immediate attention to the crime scene before they could escape. Leaving her at Kmart bought the killer a 48-hour head start before the bodies were ever found. Ultimately, the Mineral, Washington killer was an organized, criminally sophisticated predator who successfully eluded the FBI and local authorities. By preying on couples in isolated locations, they capitalized on the vulnerability of human isolation. Decades later, the trees still hold the ultimate secret: the identity of the phantom who left a trail of blood and tube socks in the winter snow.